Morning, everyone. Can everyone hear me in the back? Good? Okay. First of all, thank you all for being here on a Sunday morning. I know it's hard. Just like to thank the organizers for doing this. I know it's not easy to organize a conference. I do that myself back in Brazil, so just thanks for them to doing this. And this is my second year here at LongCon. Last year I was talking about DevSecOps. The slides and video are online if you want to check it out. And yeah, basically, my name is Magno Rodrigues, also known as Magno Logan, and that's it. So yeah, I'm an AppSec or InfoSec specialist. I work for a large food delivery company. You might guess which one. But I'm here representing myself, so everything that I say here is my own opinion and not my employer's. Also, you may have noticed already that English is not my first language, so sorry if I make any mistakes, but if you don't understand or if you have any questions, just let me know. That's my main focus right now, application security testing, DevSecOps, and secure coding. I'm the founder of JampaSec, which is a conference back in Brazil in the Northeast. We're on a 5th edition right now, and we had over 300 people this year. And I was also the founder of OAS Paraíba chapter, which is the chapter for my state, and that it's running there right now with a friend of mine. I spoke at many conferences back in Brazil, also in Portugal, and my second year here at LongCon. I'm also interested in martial arts, investments, gaming, and bug bounty. So if you want to talk about those topics, just let me know. Our agenda for today is basically web hacking 101, the basics of web application hacking. I know that when people want to start with working with security, they mostly like the offensive part of it, like I want to hack stuff. I want to find vulnerabilities, right? And I know that's interesting and it's nice, but sometimes they just grab some tools online and start running them without understanding what they do and what is happening underlying, like what is the tool making, how the tool behaves. So I think it's very important for you to understand the basics first before you start doing any hacking yourself. So we're just gonna cover the basics of HTTP, response codes, stuff like that, very quickly, just to have everyone on the same page of before we start working with Burp. And Burp Suite, I'm gonna talk about the community edition. There's 3 editions. I'm gonna talk about that later, and basically a few features from Burp, proxy, target, dashboard, spider, stuff like that. Basic stuff for you to start doing web application security testing. A few disclaimers. I'm not a Burp expert, right? I'm just a user, like most people here. I understand the tool. I know how it works. But if anything that I say here you think it's not right or it's not accurate, just let me know. And why not Zap? I got this question when I was working at this presentation, and a friend of mine got mad because I said, because I want to talk about Burp. Why not? Right? Basically, it's like I have more familiarity with Burp. I use Burp more longer, and I think it's better than Zap. So as much as I like the WASP organization and its projects, I don't want to talk about Zap. That's it. Okay, basic introduction about HTTP, right? Hypertext transfer protocol. Basically, what is a hypertext? Does anyone know here? Can anyone explain to me? Easily? Good. Basically, is text with links to other text, right? References, files, stuff like that. That's gonna be important later. It's a simple, lightweight, stateless, and by default without encryption. Why it's simple? Because it's based on requests and responses, right? Simple like that. Stateless, because it doesn't save the state of the user, right? And we're gonna see how it can do that with other functionalities. Basically, and without encryption, right? We know that HTTP it's clear text. You can see the communication easily, and that's not safe. A little bit of history, the timeline. The protocol has less than 30 years. It started with version 09 in 1991. The most used version until today, I think, is version 1.1. We're slowly shifting to version 2. That was released in 2015. And the version 3 just got released a few months ago. So people are, browsers and companies are slowly starting to use it. Okay, the basic of a get request. Here's a get request. You have the method right there on the first line. You can see it's a get. The path of the file that you're looking for on the application, the version of the protocol, and headers down there. There are multiple headers. I'm not gonna explain all of them, right? But you can see it's easy to know what the header means. Here's a response from the server, the version of the protocol as well, the status code that we're gonna talk about later, and the message, and also some headers. Let me just do a simple demo here. Okay, so if I want to do a can everyone see this in the back there? It's fine. No.
No, you can zoom that harder.
Difficult to read.
Let's see here.
Sysinternal zoom it.
What?
Sysinternal zoom it.
Yeah, let's see here. Okay, terminal zone. Better?
Yep.
Okay. So here, if I want to make a simple GET request, sorry. Bad request here. If I want to make, I can just change the version. Version 0. Bad request. Let me see here. I have some notes. Okay. The options. Okay. So you can have results here. You can do it easily. Of course, manually, it's not feasible for you to test a web application like that. But you can easily guess. You can have information about the headers here, what it's doing, the length of the file, the response, stuff like that, right? Okay. Okay, headers allow the client to and the server to pass the additional information with the request and the response. They based on the username and value format. They can be grouped in 4 types. General headers, which are headers that are used on the request and the response. Request headers, mostly only used for the request. Response headers for response, and entity headers provides information about the entity or the file that's on the post on the response. 2 main HTTP methods that are used are get and post. Basically, the difference between those, from our security perspective, is that get sends the parameters on the URL, and you can get that information from logs and from all the path that the request goes through. And post information, you have the parameters on the body of the request. Other HTTP methods that's important to know when you're testing an application. Head is basically a get, but only return headers. Put and delete, it's it's used a lot on APIs, REST APIs. There's options that provides you what methods are allowed on the web server. It's also a good start to know what is allowed on the web server, what methods you have there. And trace echoes the request. There is some vulnerabilities related to that method. Usually, you should have it disabled on production. Status code. Basically, you have 5 categories of status code. The main ones are informational, from 100 to 199, success, 200, redirect, client error, and server error. I've never seen in real life scenario are informational response, but yeah, most common ones are 200 for success, 404 not found, 403 forbidden, stuff like that. Okay, so how does if HTTP is stateless, how does the application can control the state of the user and manage who is making the request and maybe save information and preferences about the user, right? That's using sessions and cookies. Basically, when you make the first request, you receive a session ID, which is stored on your client as a cookie, as a text file. But those, as HTTP is a text protocol, you can change it, you can manipulate that stuff if not protected. And it's basically, a good example would be a shopping cart where you add information there and it's stored. Other 3 topics that it's important to know when testing applications is encoding, hashing, and encryption. Some people might confuse or mistake those. Basically, encoding is translating an information to another form of information. Like it's not an encryption; it can be reversed. So it's a way for you to make sure that information is treated as data and not part of the web page or not part of the code, right? For example, here a base 64 encoding. Hashing, it's very important to understand when you see on the web application when it's being used. Hashing, basically, most applications use hashing for storing passwords, right? There are multiple algorithms for hashing. Most common ones are bcrypt, scrypt, pbkdf2. Why? Because older algorithms like MD5 and SHA-1, they are usually faster, right? And so if your database gets compromised, it's easier for the attack to perform something called Hannibal tables and try to guess which string generated that password and check for that. Those algorithms, they are slower. That's why they're recommended, because it's technically unfeasible for an attacker to guess the password of your users. Another thing that's important is also using salt, because that prevents 2 users that have the same password having the same hash, since you're using the same algorithm, right? And for encryption, basically, you have symmetric and asymmetric encryption. It can be reversed if you have the key. It's mostly used for confidentiality. So, for example, HTTPS. What is a proxy, right? Because we're gonna talk about Burp Suite. You need to understand what is a proxy. Right? Proxy is basically a message forwarding mechanism, right? It's selected by the client. It gets your information and sends to the server the destination that you want, and then you receive a response. You can if you have control of that proxy, you can either manipulate that data, change information, add new headers, stuff like that. And that's what you can do with Burp as well. Burp Suite is an intercepting HTTP proxy. It's an integrated platform for performing security and testing of web applications. It's developed by Portswigger, the company that maintains the tool. It currently has 3 editions. The Community Edition, which is free, you can download it and use it. The Pro Edition for professionals or consultants who perform pen tests on a daily basis. And their Enterprise Edition, which is usually used on a CI/CD pipeline for you to run automated scans after you build your applications. It's written in Java. Okay, start the demo here. Just a few notes. The community version. Okay. The community version doesn't have the vulnerability scanner. It doesn't have session persistence, no engagement tools, and also the intruder is throttled. Like you can't change, you can't use threads and stuff like that. You're gonna see it here. So if you work as a professional pen tester, or if you wanna work as a professional pen tester, I recommend you getting the Pro version. And if you do that on a daily basis and your company doesn't provide you a Burp Pro license, you need to find another place to work. Okay, let me close Burp here. Okay. So after you download and install Burp, so here, as I said, the Community Edition, you can't save or you can open stuff on the disk. Basically, you can only use a temporary project, which makes it hard because if you're pen testing, it takes not just 1 day, but more than like a week or 2 weeks, then you're gonna have it to leave Burp running for that time, and you can't even shut down your computer, otherwise you're gonna lose all your work. So that's a big problem. You can either use the Burp default, which is fine, but you can also load configuration from a file. If you have specific configurations, like if you're a hardcore user and you want stuff done your way and you have some preferences, you can save that as a file and load it from there. It's fine, but you're going to use the Burp default. Okay, the new version, the 2.0 something, now 2.1, they have now this dashboard, which is different from the last 1 version. It shows you here exactly the passive crawling or the spider. Here's just the vulnerabilities here, the issue activity. You can hide that if you want. And the event log, which shows if you're having issues with your proxy and or you're not receiving the information from your web application, you can see some issues here. You can see it right away that it didn't connect to the proxy on port 8080, which is the default port for Burp Suite. Can anyone guess what that can be? Why it couldn't connect to the port 880? Something's listening already, right? So what I can do is either turn off that service or change the port easily, right? So you can see here there's many tabs. These are the default tabs here, target, proxy, intruder, and stuff like that. We're gonna talk about them, most of them I think, if we have time. But here on the tab proxy, you can see, you can define the options for your proxy where it's gonna listen to. So here it's not running. You can see it here because the checkbox is not marked up there. You can easily add it here. So I have something running on my machine on that port, so I'm just gonna change it to 890, and now it's working. Now it's running, and now I can intercept connections here on this browser. I have it configured already. You can do it yourself. You can go to the proxy options, network settings, and change it here manually. The problem is with that is that like for every request or every application that you go to, you're gonna have to either turn it on and off and again. So there's some browser extensions that you can use for for doing that for you automatically. For Firefox, you have Foxy Proxy, where you can download and set up Burp for you here. So I have it already enabled. See, ready localhost 890, stuff like that. For if you use Chrome or any browser derived from Chromium, you can use the Switchy Omega extension as well. Okay, so now it's listening to Burp, and that's one of the first, I think, first things that get people when they're starting to use this tool is that if you make a request and then you see it's loading and what's happening, right? What's going on? Usually Burp is gonna show you that there is it's gonna blink the icon there and you're gonna see there's a request, stop here and you need to do something because by default, the intercept is on. So once you start listening to the proxy and sending requests, you're gonna see they're gonna capture and wait for your action. You need to do something. So if you don't care, if you're not changing the request here and you don't care right now about the requests that are coming in, and you just need to first like fingerprint the application and understand what's doing, you can just turn it off here. Still, all the requests that are going through Burp are gonna show here for you, so it's easy. You can go back. You can also send it to other tools. You can highlight here with different colors if you need to go back later as like a note or something. You can also trace it like the first request that's doing the authentication, stuff like that. Okay. So here's the intercept. If you wanna change the request on the fly, you can do it here. The HTTP history, as I mentioned, it shows all the history of the request. You can order here by, like, the latest one is gonna show up there. You have information about the GET methods, the URL, the status, stuff like that. Let's see. Okay. So I'm just gonna crawl, click on some links here on the application to feed information to Burp. Okay. You can see the request here. You can see also the parameters that I provided to Burp. You can see that there is a user token as well. So all that stuff you can see here on proxy, and you can send it to other features of Burp. Let's see, what else? Oh, I forgot to mention there is like a workflow of Burp. There's some tools specifically for recon and analysis, others for vulnerability detection, and others specifically for tool configuration. I advise you not to test on live applications that you don't have authorization to do it. So here for you, there's some OWASP project that provides you with a lot of vulnerable applications for you to test. Those ones are online, so you can just browse the website and configure there. There's some ones that are like live VMs that you can download and install on your machine. But yeah, if you don't have permission to do it and it's not your own website, and make sure that you have written permission when you do it. Okay. So Burp configuration, we've done the Burp proxy. I forgot the certificate. That's something. If you're accessing a website that uses HTTPS, you're probably gonna have an issue, and that's the second thing that usually get most people when they're starting with Burp, because you need to add the Burp certificate on your browser so that Burp can create the tunnel between that application. So let's see. Okay, now here it's working, but if you check the certificate here, view certificate, you can see that's was generated by Portswigger certificate authority. So what you can do, you can either go directly to Burp, or you can go here and get the certificate, save on your machine, that certificate from Portswigger, and you can go to your browser options and import the certificate there. View certificates on authorities, you can import, and then you just add the file that you just downloaded from Burp there. And it's gonna create the proper tunnels between your HTTPS applications and Burp, and then you can easily test it. So basically, it's gonna do SSL inspection to see the information and show you the request there. Okay. Also, the Burp has a lot of documentation available for you. You can open it here if you have any questions. It's all the information that's available on their website, but if you don't have a connection, an internet connection, when you're testing an application, if you're using a local proxy from an enterprise or something, you can easily see the information here, all the documentation available. Okay. The dashboard is going to show you how many links, items added to the map. You can see it here that there is a lot of URLs on the target sitemap. I don't want to test all those applications, so I can tell Burp to remove them from scope and add this specifically website to the scope. So if I go here and just click in here, add to scope, see, this is going to give me a warning, like everything that's out of scope is not going to show on the history. So it's going to start ignoring all those sites, especially when you're testing a live or production web application that have links to other websites that you don't own or that's outside of scope. It's very important to note that before you start testing, because otherwise you might be scanning applications that you don't have permissions to do it. So just take note into that. So you can see it here that's going to show logging out of scope is disabled, right? We added here, I can do it manually here if I want. I can exclude, for example, specific directories or specific paths of the application if I want. Here on the sitemap, it's going to basically show to me all the pages and files that Burp was able to crawl. The black ones is the one that it specifically made a request to, and the gray ones is that found a link there on that page, but it didn't make the proper request yet. So, but it shows for you that it's there, it exists. From scope, sitemap, that basically it. So you can send this request to other tools from Burp. One of the tools that's very interesting is the Intruder. The Intruder is basically a semi-automated module from Burp that you can use to execute payloads. You can do like brute forcing attacks. You can map the number of users of an application. Can do most of things. It's very configurable. When you send a specific request to Intruder, it's already going to flag a few parameters that you might want to use it for your attack. You can change it that, you can clear, you can add new ones. There are 4 attack types. That's one of the things that people usually don't understand or forget when using Burp. There are 4 attack types on the Intruder. The first of them is the sniper, where it's going to change every request with only one of, if you have multiple parameters, it's going to change every request with the first payload that you sent for that first parameter, and then it's going to send. And then it goes on for the next parameters that you have, but using one single list. The battering ram is, if you have multiple parameters set up here, it's going to change all the parameters at once for the first payload and send it to the application. The pitchfork allows you to have different lists for each parameter that you have, but it's going to change them every time at every request. And cluster bomb, which is the most exhaustive one, it's going to perform all those permutations of lists that you have, and it's gonna send a lot of requests for the application. So make sure you use it wisely, and you know what you're trying to accomplish with the attack, so that you use the proper attack type. Because I've seen, otherwise, if you don't, especially if you're doing like external pen test and you don't want to get detected, you need to make sure that you make the least amount of requests to find the information of the application. Otherwise, you're gonna get flagged by the security team of the company. Here you can add your payloads. As I said, you can have multiple payloads sets here. If I add, for example, I can add as a parameter here, because I'm using the sniper, it's only gonna show one list. If I'm using the pitchfork, it's gonna show other lists here, and it's gonna show me the payload count and the request count based on the list that I provide to Burp, so you know how many requests it's going to make before it makes. Let's see. Let's do it here. Simple list. Just numbers. Let me remove this. If I have like it's not a good idea, but if you have an application that has session IDs that are not random, you can guess that information. You can just try to find a session ID that's valid here, for example. I can tell it to go random numbers. I can also set step by step how many requests. In increment by 5, for example, or by 1. It shows here up there how many requests it's going to make. If you want to start the attack, you can start the attack here. Because I'm using the pitchfork. Yeah, it's gonna give you this just this warning here. Some attacks are throttly, as I mentioned, so it might take more time, right? And you can easily see all the requests that it's making. As just an example here, how can you see if the intruder attack that you made was successful? How can you guess? Sorry?
Response code and payload size.
Yes, exactly. So the payload size would be the first guess for you to think. You can order by the length here, so you can identify what's different. Because if you're getting the same error or the same bad response every time, when the attack is successful, then you can see it's probably going to have a different size. And also the response code, if the application is not returning 200 all the time, because I've seen applications do that just to trick the scanner, then you can easily guess by the status of the response which information was successful. When you don't have that, or you couldn't guess what was wrong or what was different, you can send the request to comparer, which is another feature from Burp, and compare those two requests. So as I said, the options here on the intruder is it's disabled on the community version, but you can, if you have the pro version, you can change stuff here on threads and stuff like that to make the attack either go faster or go slower if you want to go undetected. Basically, that's it from the intruder. The repeater is another feature where I can easily change requests on the fly and send it back and see the response here. So I can modify and already see the response. If I want to go back to the previous one, I can use that history. It doesn't show on the HTTP history, but it shows here. I see the response right away. If I'm trying to find something, a specific payload on the application and what's going on, right? So it's good for that. You can change the windows here if you don't want to show the request and response on both on the same window. Let's see. Okay. The decoder, as I talked about the encoding and decoding options, you can get strings from your application and you can encode or decode here. There are many options for you to encode or decode. It's here. URL encoding, HTML encoding, base64, stuff like that. The comparer, if I want to send two different requests to the comparer, let's see. I select the first one request that I sent here, and the second one here, and I can compare by words and by bytes. Usually I use by words. You can see the difference. It's gonna show. I got two random requests here, and it's gonna show. It's basically a diff tool, so you can see what changed, methods, what was added, and what was deleted. So you can easily see, especially if you're running the intruder attack and you don't know what changed, you can check it here. Burp has also a lot of extensions. It's a module tool. You can add extensions there. You can create your own. It has also an API. For the community version, you still have a lot of extensions that are free, so you don't need to have the pro version. Those ones here, you require the pro version. You can list here which ones are more popular or have better ratings to try it out. Two plugins that I really like using is the Auto Repeater and the Turbo Intruder. So it automates some stuff that you're doing manually here with Intruder and Repeater. It automates for you on the fly while you're testing. And if you're testing a web application from a network that all the traffic needs to go to a proxy, you can set up the proxy here. There are multiple options for proxy for your testing. Let's see. What else? Let me just go back here to my notes. We talked about documentation, the burp store, okay, dashboard. Spidering, we mentioned about spidering, what it is. Basically, you get the first page, you get all the reference, all the links there, and you go through that, and it goes on the application. Checks for JavaScript files, stuff like that. Sitemap, scope, target, positions, payloads, options. The repeater I mentioned as well. Comparer, decoder for if you want to decode anything there. And I recommend you take a look at those two extensions. It's really nice. And also, there is a free online course available from the Cyber Mentor on YouTube that they use the web application, the vulnerable web application from OWASP, which is called OWASP Juice Shop, for doing some hacking with Burp. It's really nice and it's free. And that's it. Those are my contacts. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Thank you.